silent passion among the bookshelves. Emily Donovan never considered herself a romantic soul. At 32, she preferred the company of books to people, finding particular pleasure in organizing and preserving the literary treasures of the New York Public Library. A tall, slender brunette with expressive brown eyes and thin gold-rimmed glasses, she looked like a typical librarian, but only at first glance. Beneath her strict navy blue inclined suit and cream silk blouse lay a passionate nature, in love with literature and history. Her long dark hair, usually gathered in an elegant bun, had a tendency to escape in rebellious strands throughout the day, creating a sort of halo around her face that gave her a romantic appearance by evening. That rainy September morning, when James Caulfield first crossed the library's threshold, Emily was sorting through a new collection of rare 18th century editions. The tall, broad-shouldered history professor from Columbia University immediately caught her attention. His sandy hair, slightly disheveled from the humid New York air, gave him a boyish charm despite his distinguished position. His gray eyes behind elegant horn-rimmed glasses radiated such intelligence and vitality that Emily found herself holding his gaze longer than a professional of her standing should. "Excuse me," his deep voice with a slight raspiness made her heart skip a beat. "I'm looking for the rare manuscripts department. I'm James Caulfield. I arranged access to the collection of documents about New York's early history." Over the next month, James became a regular visitor to the library. He would come every day, usually around 10 in the morning, before the crowd of students filled the reading rooms. His tweed jacket with patches on the elbows became a familiar element of the interior, as did the worn leather briefcase that always accompanied him. Emily noticed how he watched her from behind the bookshelves when he thought she wasn't looking. His gaze, attentive and deep, made her heart beat faster. She caught herself paying more attention to her appearance, wearing dresses more often instead of her usual suits, choosing more elegant accessories. She loved watching him work, bent intently over ancient documents, occasionally running his fingers through his hair in a gesture she had come to consider characteristic of him. Sometimes he would remove his glasses and massage the bridge of his nose, and this simple gesture somehow seemed incredibly attractive to her. That evening, she stayed after closing, working on cataloging rare editions in the library's west wing. Massive windows let in the last rays of the setting sun, creating mysterious shadows among the tall bookshelves. Emily had removed her low-heeled shoes so her steps wouldn't disturb the library's sacred silence. She loved these moments of solitude when the huge building belonged only to her. Ancient tomes seemed to whisper their secrets to her, and dust particles danced in the rays of the setting sun, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Having freed her hair from its pins, she let it fall freely onto her shoulders, enjoying the feeling of freedom after a long workday. "Miss Donovan?" James's deep voice made her start. She hadn't heard him approach. "I'm sorry if I frightened you. I was working in the archives and seemed to have lost track of time." Emily turned and saw him standing in the passage between the shelves. The light of the setting sun created a golden halo around his silhouette. His tie was slightly loosened, and the sleeves of his white shirt were rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms. Emily felt her cheeks flush crimson. She took a step back and bumped into a bookshelf, feeling the hard spines of ancient folios against her back. The smell of old leather and paper mingled with James's cologne, creating an intoxicating mixture. He stepped closer, and now she could sense the subtle aroma of his perfume, something woody with notes of musk, mixed with the scent of his old leather briefcase and a faint trace of coffee. The light from the desk lamp cast mysterious shadows across his face, highlighting his strong jaw and sensual lips. Emily noticed the light stubble that had appeared during the day. It made him look even more masculine. "What did you want to talk about?" she asked, trying to sound calm, though her heart was already beating a wild rhythm. Her fingers involuntarily gripped the edge of the shelf behind her. James took another step closer. Now only a few centimeters of space remained between them, filled with the electric tension of desire. Instead of answering, he reached out and carefully removed her glasses. His fingers barely touched her temples as he did so, sending tremors throughout her body. "You have extraordinarily beautiful eyes, Emily. I noticed that on the first day." They're like dark amber in sunlight. His voice had grown lower, more husky. His fingers barely touched her cheek, and she involuntarily leaned into his touch. James's skin was warm and slightly rough from evening stubble. The air between them seemed to have thickened with tension, each breath becoming more difficult. "I've been watching you all this month," he whispered, running his thumb across her lower lip. "The way you move between the shelves, how you smile when you find a particularly interesting volume." Emily felt her knees weaken at his words and touches. James leaned even closer, his breath tickling her lips. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his eyes darkened with desire. "Don't stop," she breathed in response, and at that moment his lips covered her mouth. The kiss was simultaneously tender and commanding, full of restrained passion. His lips were soft but demanding, his tongue gently exploring her mouth, sending waves of pleasure coursing through her entire body. Emily felt her hands reach for his neck of their own accord, fingers tangling in the soft hair at his nape. James pressed her against the bookshelf, and several ancient volumes wobbled in their places. His hands slid along her waist, feeling the heat of her skin through the thin fabric of her blouse. Each of his touches left fiery trails in its wake. He began slowly unbuttoning her blouse, one button at a time, pausing after each to kiss the newly exposed skin. Emily's trembling fingers went to his tie, loosening the knot and feeling the silky fabric slip between her fingers. When the tie finally yielded, she pulled on it, drawing him even closer. Beneath his white shirt, she could feel the heat of his body and the firmness of muscles rippling under her palms. The scent of his cologne mixed with his natural skin fragrance, creating an intoxicating blend. James broke away from her lips and began kissing her neck, moving lower. His lips left moist trails on her heated skin, his tongue tracing sensitive spots behind her ear and in the hollow between her collarbones. Emily threw her head back, hitting the book's spines, but didn't even notice. Her entire being was focused on the sensations his lips and hands were giving her. Her blouse was now completely unbuttoned, revealing ivory-colored lace lingerie. The delicate lace barely concealed her breasts, which rose and fell with her rapid breathing. James pulled back for a moment to admire her. "You're beautiful," he whispered, running his fingers along the edge of the lace. "Like a work of art in this light." His touches were simultaneously gentle and demanding, as if he couldn't decide whether to caress her tenderly or give in to passion. Emily reached for the buttons of his shirt, undoing them one by one. Her fingers glided over his hot skin, exploring every curve of his muscles, feeling them tense beneath her touch. James groaned deeply when she ran her nails across his chest, leaving light red marks. Suddenly, somewhere in the depths of the library, something fell, causing a loud sound that echoed under the high vaults. They froze, listening, their hearts beating in unison so loudly that it seemed the sound filled the entire library. "Probably just a book falling," Emily whispered, and they both laughed nervously. James brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering on her cheek. "You know, I have the keys to the rare manuscripts office," he said softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "There's a very comfortable antique leather couch in there." Emily smiled and kissed him again, this time slowly and deeply. "Lead the way, Professor." They made their way through the dark corridors of the library, holding hands and stopping occasionally for kisses. The thick carpet muffled their footsteps, while moonlight streaming through the tall windows created a magical atmosphere. The grand building seemed to hold its breath, keeping their secret in its ancient walls. The rare manuscripts office was a small room with wooden panels on the walls and heavy burgundy velvet curtains. The antique cognac-colored leather couch stood by the window, surrounded by cabinets with glass doors housing the most valuable editions. Their brass handles gleamed softly in the moonlight. James lit the desk lamp, bathing the room in soft amber light. Emily stood in the middle of the room, her unbuttoned blouse falling off one shoulder, her hair cascading in dark waves over her shoulders. He approached her from behind and began kissing her neck, simultaneously sliding the blouse from her shoulders. She turned to face him and helped remove his shirt. Their bare bodies pressed against each other, and both moaned at the sensation of skin against skin. James lifted her in his arms and carried her to the couch. The antique leather pleasantly cooled their heated skin. Emily looked like a work of art in the soft lamplight. Her skin appeared golden, her eyes shining with desire. James kissed every inch of her body, savoring each sigh and moan. Their bodies merged in a single rhythm, the ancient couch creaking softly beneath them, while outside the window, the moon slowly rose over New York's silhouette. Emily tangled her fingers in his hair, pulling him closer for a deep kiss as waves of pleasure washed over them both. Afterward, they lay embracing on the couch. James covered them with his jacket. Emily traced patterns on his chest with her finger, feeling completely content. "You know," he said, kissing her temple, "I think I've found the most interesting material for my book about New York's history right here." Emily laughed and pinched his side. "Don't you dare write about this in your book, Professor." "Maybe I'll write a novel instead," he rolled over, hovering above her. "About a passionate librarian and a historian who found something more than ancient manuscripts." I like that idea," she whispered, pulling him down for another kiss. "But I think we need to conduct more research." The moon drifted slowly over the city, and in the ancient library, two lovers wrote their own story, one that would never appear in books but would forever remain in their hearts. The old library kept their secret, adding it to the countless stories it had witnessed over the centuries. And perhaps, in years to come, someone would notice that the books on that particular shelf in the West Wing seemed to hold a special kind of magic, as if they had witnessed something extraordinary on that autumn evening.